All right. Happy Strange Loop. Who's having a good time so far today? Woo, all right. I will admit this is my first Strange Loop, so why not go out with a bang and get your first Strange Loop talk at the last one, right? All right, y'all. I'm very excited to be here today. It's a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and we're going to be exploring it. But first off, there's going to be a couple of points here. There's mild audience participation. I know you're back in school again, but I think we can all do that, right? All right, that's what I like to see. This is going to be a fun talk, y'all. Let's have some fun. Today, I'm here to talk to you about open data's importance in machine learning. Now, when coming up with this talk, there's a lot of talks, ideas out there you can give. But alternatively, I wanted to title this talk, How Do We Save the World from Robots and Tech Overlords? Yeah, hell yeah. I like to see that. Let's get excited for saving the world. I think I can do one more better, right? One better. Let's title this, How Do We Save Our World from Robots Built by Tech Overlords? Yeah, let's give it up. Let's save our world together, everyone. We're all on this planet in this little blue dot in the sky. Now, the reason I think it's really important, I'm a huge open data fan. I'm a huge open source fan. I got my start in tech because of open data and open source. But I'm a journalist by trade. I went to school for journalism and art. I have a minor in gender studies too. I'll let you know when I use that. But in all reality, a little bit more about myself. So you know who exactly I am, just talking up here, kind of doing weird audience participation things. My name is Erin Mikail Staples. I'm a developer advocate and developer experience engineer. I'm a stand-up comedian on the side. My work's been featured in the New York Times, Financial Times, and LA Times for comedy. I'm a rescue dog parent. That's right, you're gonna see pictures of my dog later. It's part of being a rescue dog parent. Hell yeah, we want dog pictures. Oh, and I'm looking for my next job as a developer advocate or developer experience engineer. So if you're hiring, hit me up. There's a QR code for that at the end of my talk as well, don't worry. Now, just a quick heads up, we will have time for some Q&A today. Additionally, everything in this slide deck, this presentation, will be available on my website immediately after this talk. Some of it's already there, don't worry. There's a QR code at the end, you have to stick around. Additionally, I'm as what you would describe as very online. That basically means I'm on every single platform out there and I spend way too much time and I justify it as building relationships and work. AKA, find me on the Strange Loop Slack or find me on one of these multitude of platforms. And until that career pigeon platform debuts, I guess I'm hanging out on the internet. Now, shall we begin? Today's adventure, I love you guys, this is a great audience. First off, we're gonna talk about where we're at now in the world of open data, machine learning, and what's happening. We're gonna talk about what exactly is open data? What does it mean? And then what does it have to do with machine learning? Why should we care? What's the worst case scenario after all? How many of us have just been like, it's not that bad? And then what can we do to save the world? Okay, y'all ready? Woo! So first off, let's explore the current state of machine learning and see what exactly is out there. Now, machine learning has really hit the zeitgeist as of late. We've seen the New Yorker parody it in cartoons. I'm currently building robots on the side to roast comedians in New York City. And it's hit a lot of headlines. My personal zeitgeist metric, does my mother know what machine learning is? Fun fact, I spent the last year working in machine learning, and my mom still has kind of maybe an idea of what I do. She thinks I build robots online for a job, which is not exactly wrong. But when we think of machine learning and we think of a lot what's out there right now, we get the doom scrolling headlines. Do I have any people working in machine learning here? Just curious. Cool, we got a few of you. Welcome to the club. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of scary doom scrolly headlines. There's a lot of stuff that you look online and you cry a little bit. But we're at a crossroads. The world of machine learning, the world of these models and algorithms have become more accessible than ever before. And that's pretty cool. If you would have told me 5 years ago I was working in machine learning, I would have looked at you like you were a little bit on the loony bin, like not great there. But what we're doing at this crossroads is thinking about where we can have a lot of impact. Could we really take a stand against these tech overlords right now? Out of all the think pieces, all the headlines, and all the articles that are out there, I think this article is one that I really reference a lot when I think about the current impact and the concerns. This article, which was featured in Scientific American, written by Dr. Emily M. Bender and Alex Hanna earlier this year, talked about the real harm that AI and machine learning can use. It also talked about, hey, let's quit thinking about the hype and the think pieces and actually focus on it. So how exactly did we get here? How did we end up at this really interesting crossroads of open data, machine learning, and you guys let me take the stage at Strange Loop? Now, let's fast forward. Let's go on a little trip through time together. First off, let's zoom back in time. It's 1949. The concept of machine learning was just starting to really get the hang of things. We think about machine learning by Donald Hebb, who came up with this idea of like, hey, this is how neurons work. I think we can do something with computers, and by modeling off of what they've learned. A few years later, the first term and the first time that we saw machine learning really come into play and used together was first used by Arthur Samuel of IBM. And this concept of machine learning, it wasn't the machine learning you know of today. We had understood how a game of checkers work. We weren't quite beating humans yet, or chess champions at that point, but we knew that we could build models that theoretically would play checkers. Pretty cool. In the 1970s, we made our next major jump that we like to see in machine learning. This is at the point when there was so much data out there that we could start to see more data out there and use it to build artificial neural networks. So process so much more data than the average human could. Really cool. In the 1990s, we developed this idea of boosting algorithms. What that means is we were allowed to start taking machine learning to the next level. This gave us the foundation and what's required to think of things like computer vision. So has anybody used a backup camera or a cool Snapchat filter? Yeah, y'all have benefited from that work. Computer vision's pretty freaking cool. And now but the 2000s, we saw the basis of the technologies that gave us foundation models. That's what we think of when we think of those generative AI models. Things like, our DALL-Es, our GPTs, our diffusion models. A lot of that technology was first come up with in the early 2000s. So a bit of a timeline there. Let's flash forward to now. We're on the precipice of robots building other robots. Wild. We are now starting to see and explore what it looks like when we build models based off of data that is generated by a model. A little bit meta. So now that we know what we're at in the world of machine learning, let's explore the other half of the equation. Who knows what open data is? We've got a few. Who has worked with open data? A few more. Who has thanked their maintainer who has probably managed an open data set recently? If you haven't, offer them to buy a beer. They'd probably really appreciate that. And if you guys are hanging out in the hallway, don't be a stranger. I promise I showered. There's some extra seats in here. Have some fun. I'm going to flashboard. We're going to travel back through my own personal history. This is me in grad school. Look at that naivete person on the left. She probably still has an ID band walking around. That's her first day of grad school. Nice selfie there, Erin. Probably still using that ID card, carrying it around my hip to get into the building. Later on, that's someone who had never really worked with open data and was intimidated by the world of machine learning. On the right, that's still me, but that's someone who is doing some research based on open data in our public health system. So at the time, I was working on a project in grad school looking into Lyme disease misinformation. And a lot of the research that we did came from the world of open data and machine learning. I didn't think that I'd be working in that a few years later after this, but it's pretty cool what can happen when we are open to a world of open data. So where did this world of open data come from as well? First off, let's explore the formative years of the internet. In the 1960s, these are actual notes from my graduate school textbooks of how much optimism people had of the internet. In the 1960s, people were like, hell yeah, internet's dope. We're gonna have a lot of rules, excitement going on. Guess what? Things happened. And there's scientific studies, this is a lot from thinking about the internet and how it's built. We don't have that same optimism in the internet. Actually, if anything, every single day that we exist on this little blue glob, studies have shown that there is less interest and less trust in things on the internet than ever before. Terrifying, actually. But when thinking of open data, this is not a new concept. This is not revolutionary. The concept of open data is actually just a few years earlier than the world of machine learning. In 1942, researcher Robert King Melton came up with this concept of open data. His belief: research should be available and openly accessible to everyone. The world can only be a better place when we all contribute to the larger common pot of knowledge, and we give up our intellectual rights to allow knowledge as a species and a society to move forward. Wouldn't that be cool if everybody still thought that today? Yeah. To sum things up, this is a great shot if you want to get your screenshots in and take a photo of this, remember it for later. Open data now is defined as a philosophy and a practice requiring that certain data be freely available to everyone without restrictions from copyright, patents, or other mechanisms of control. One thing that I want to put out on this, if I could triple underline freely available to everyone without restrictions, that would be where we'd put some highlight underline there even more. So where does this open data come from? And I will put a disclaimer here. This is largely coming from a US-centric lens. So again, there are a lot of global projects. We're gonna look about it from a US-centric lens and acknowledge my bias there. On May 9th, 2013, President Obama signed an executive order. It was actually one of the first executive orders of his administration period. He signed an executive order that made open and machine-readable data the new default for government information. His intention: open data can increase transparency, it can increase trust, and public accountability. Pretty cool. We saw a rise in open data from health, energy, climate, education, finance, public safety, and global development sectors. This data was then used, and we hired teams of maintainers and builders to manage these data sets, as well as making them open and accessible via API on the public government website. Well, these are just some of the organizations that are still doing it to this day. Personally, I live in New York. I am a contributor and have been part of the people who've hung out at New York City Open Data Week. Yeah, thank you. We've also seen the Smithsonian has a public open data set. The Department of Education actually has some really fun data sets if you ever want to look at school districts and cry a little bit about public education in the state of America. Federal Data Strategy. There's a lot of really cool cancer and medical research open data sets out there. There's a lot of organizations that are having it out there. But as much as we absolutely love open data and we love to see this, does anybody know what happens in the long term with government funding? Yeah, we can laugh a little bit. This isn't really a priority anymore. The amount of open data that exists and high quality open data exists has decreased. The priority and the public accountability for open data is not there. Actually, so I'm an adjunct instructor at NYU a little bit on the side, and we reference the New York City public data set. Sometimes we have to go back to 2012 to see the pretty well laid out examples. This is no longer an initiative that we really are prioritizing. I think that's a problem. So what the heck do these open data sets have to do with machine learning? Foreshadowing here, this is when you get to see a picture of my dog. It's pretty cute. First off, for those of you who've worked with data, we know that data tells a story. Data lets us know how well our school districts are performing, traffic on city streets, or even helps us build the model to create that cool Snapchat filter with the dog ears and your tongue out. That's all built off of data. Good stories, they have context. Many times we need to add, where are people's faces aligned to build that Snapchat filter? What buildings exist around a city street? Why are this important? Machine learning at its core is just a way to solve problems at scale. And without the right context, can we ever solve the right problems? Is the traffic in New York City going to be the same as the traffic in Kansas City? Do we have the same public infrastructure in Europe as we do in the United States? These are context problems. I would also argue, without the right context, can we even solve these problems at all? Or rather, are we creating more problems? We've read the headlines. We've seen the ads when it's been going bad. I would argue, because of the way that machine learning models are built, sometimes we're making more problems. So let's break it down. This is a very, very simplified example of what a foundational model is trained off of. The TLDR, lots of data, lots of things happening. All over the internet, we put it in, we train a model on items that are out there. Good, bad, and different. For those of you who aren't aware, a foundation model is a generative AI model. So think your ChatGPT, your Llama, your DALL-E Stable Diffusion. Those types of models where you're generating a thing of content needs to be on ginormous data sets. Problem is we don't really know what data they were trained off of and how. So we'll see an example. This is my dog Q. Very cute. Yeah, claps for Q. I found out this morning he got in trouble at daycare again, so let's hope that he doesn't get kicked out by the end of this conference. So Q, if we were to train a machine learning model about dogs based off of my dog Q, he's terrified of the rain. He's actually weirdly okay with fireworks, but thunderstorms, no go. I probably have the only dog in the world allergic to peanut butter. Yeah, I know. Oh no, big deal. He's big drama. We also are terrified of squirrels and the broom and the vacuum and the gloves. So if we were to build, let's play out in our imaginary world. I am working at a large pet store company, and I want to be looking at machine learning models, predicting trends of what people want to have in their dogs. And I train it off of my dog Q. I love Q. He's not a stereotypical dog. I officially just killed every peanut butter flavored dog treat. They would no longer be out there. As a dog owner who has a dog allergic to peanut butter, do you know how many different dog products have peanut products oil in them? That's like 70% of them. Also, I have also decided if we trained this machine learning model based on this very niche data set, we would have no toys that look like squirrels, because that's not what he would want. Now, this is a very silly, lighthearted, goofy example on a very niche data set of my goofy dog with one data point and a bunch of statistics about him. But this can have real impact. So a lot of my work that I did in grad school was on early sentiment analysis and looking at comment sections and online forums to determine if news media was actually getting the response that it did. Fun fact, this was 2020, right before the election. And so the comment section online forums and political journalism was not great. Shout out to my therapist. But while I like to make lighthearted jokes about this joke in retrospect, we were able to do a lot of this thanks to scraping Reddit and Twitter. Well, earlier this year, we lost some access to that, and Reddit and Twitter said, no, You don't get access to our publicly available data, even though it's in a public space and forum. Other places followed suit and said, we don't want machine readable or scrapable data. Now, if you're working in machine learning, this is a bit of a problem. Data is a really big thing and a needed thing when you're looking at models. But people weren't really a fan. Additionally, lobbying and public dollars has actually impacted this problem even more. Fun fact, earlier this year, Congress was found out that they were allowed to use generative AI models. Pretty cool. OpenAI lobbied Congress and said, you can only use AI models if it's our AI model. So there is a limit in our current Congress that the only model that they can use is ChatGPT on the Pro edition to work on policy. Personally, I think that's a little concerning. Don't know about you. A lot of companies have started to lobby this problem, and which leads us to a little bit of a worst case scenario. What happens if a few people start to make the rules for many? What happens when these models start to impact our everyday lives? So, we're not all doom and gloom. We're going to pull up from the doom scrolling. I swear that's why we added dog pictures, because otherwise we'd spiral. That being said, let's start advocating for some solutions. I'm curious, how many people have worked with a publicly available data set? Wow, almost everybody. Love to see it. How many people have worked with the IMDb data set at one point? Wow, a lot of us. Don't worry, me too. Me too. I've worked with the IMDb data set. So one of the problems that we're currently facing in machine learning is that there's not a really great variety of data sets out there to learn off of. And if we're all learning off the same 10 data sets, what problems might we have? So in order to build a better future with machine learning, here's what I'm proposing. And it's not just me. These are people who are building for the open and better future of machine learning overall. First off, a couple of places. We need to focus on our open data efforts. A standard file format. Many times that means we need to have an open data set. And the reason we've probably all used that IMDb data set is it's pretty widely available via API, CSV. I think there's even a SQL database about it. But we need to have a standard file format that we can all use. We love the metadata. The reason that IMDb data set is super good, it's got so much rich metadata. We know what person, what actors are in there. We know who's been involved, and so on and so forth. We also have a knowledge of periodicity, it's a $100 word for today, and consistency. It's got clear time frames. When was it updated? When was it maintained? And is it consistently available and consistently regulated? Everybody think a maintainer today. These are the people. Yeah, give it up for the maintainers. I'm never going to turn down an applause. Come on, this is fun. And lastly, people have advocated for API access. Can you call or access this data very easily via an API? Important. Now, we also see the 5 C's of data integrity. And this is from O'Reilly, but we're also seeing this a lot in open data persons and also in a lot of data science initiatives right now. So the 5 C's of data integrity. Consent. Are you getting people's consent to use the data? Do they know where it's coming from? And have they opted in? Remember, opt in, not opt out. Clarity. Do we know what this data is? How many times have we opened up a CSV or a database and cried a little bit? Yeah, same. I currently have a very silly side project I'm working on of pairing with a friend who's a data scientist, and we're cataloging the Naked and Afraid data set publicly in an open source database. And we had to clean up the consistency and clarity of how is it a city versus a state versus a country of where people are competing in this goofy reality TV show. Fun fact, the state was Georgia, not Georgia the country, Georgia the state. Consistency. Are we consistently maintaining this data set in ways that is going to be maintained for the long run? Is it consistently being updated? Going back to our federal dollars, did the money run out and then people just give up? Very real problems. Control. Who has control of the data? Is this someone who's a company that's going to just go under and it's bye, good luck? Is this something that the data set could be acquired by someone else? Who has access to edit and modify that data? And lastly, consequences. What long-term consequences does this data have or could have in the future? We need to be thinking about these things from a long-term perspective. Consequences means that we need to be thinking about, yes, I just gathered a bunch of people and I get migraines. There is a app out there that collects data about migraines. Does that app give, resources and they sell my data to a pharmaceutical company? And my price of my migraine medication just went up $1 bajillion. That's a scary consequence, even though it's telling me the trends and helping me predict when I'm going to get a migraine. That's a pretty negative consequence. But don't be afraid. There are organizations out there that are actively putting these practices into action every single day. So here's a few of them, and then I'll leave you with a few tips of where we can get involved and what you can do to help save the world. But one of the organizations I'm really excited about, I am a sibling and a child of cancer survivors. So I love to say that the European Federation for Cancer Images is a very cool one that I've been watching. It is a federated open project that is actually set to release their first set of research and data sets at the end of this year. What they're doing is they're building an open library of images of cancer so that we can build better detection modules and help people get and discover cancer faster. We're building off this open collective knowledge that's out there. And again, I'm gonna be biased in this next one, but it's near and dear to my heart. New York City Open Data. So that we have an Open Data Week in New York. It's pretty fun. I have been very fortunate to be a volunteer for it and have worked with it and helped students get into open data through contributing and with some of the grad students that I work with. And it's a government-driven initiative for public data. But they also use data for fun, so they do cool art projects and infrastructure projects. Real-life example of this being put into use is there is a group here, actually 2 blocks from my house in New York City, is one of the most deadly intersections in Brooklyn, New York. Hit by cars. People are hit by cars there, and it's terrifying. But they're using this open data set to advocate for bike lanes and pedestrian safety, which is super cool. Okay, not super cool about people getting hit by cars, but super cool we're using real life data for making a better end of solution. So, what now? If you leave nothing from this conference or nothing from this talk, what I want you to do is thank your maintainers. Understand that context is very important. And understand in order to build a better machine learning models and to have an ethical future of machine learning, it all comes down to open data at its core. We need more data sets and more important ethically obtained data sets in order to build a better future with machine learning. And this can't be ran by the few. It's gonna take the many. So again, thank your maintainers, give them some love. And lastly, if you wanna chat about this, or if you're looking for a developer advocate, or you wanna check my sources, there's a QR code there that'll point you to a page on my website. This talk, once it is updated, and if you don't wanna follow that, there's a nice little link. You can also reach me at erin.cool. All my links are available at erin.bio. Hope to see you around. But again, thank a maintainer, check my sources, and let's have some fun. Have a good one.
So we're talking about open data as a public good. Mm-hmm. Do you think we're entirely dependent on government initiatives to kind of generate a lot of open data sets? Or is there a way that we can make it profitable for companies to actually engage and embrace open data initiatives?
I love this question because I personally, as much as I do think that the federal initiatives in the United States have helped and have been one of the biggest drivers towards open data, I really hope that more companies can get involved. And there are companies out there that are building in public, in open source, and doing a lot of work. So I spoke at PyData earlier this year, and a lot of academic institutions that are backed by company initiatives are currently doing that. So I'm blanking at the one on the top of my head. Of course, that's what happens, but I'm happy to send you some more. Additionally, I also think that there's a lot of community-driven solutions that we can rely on. One of the projects that you always happened is who funds the project often and unintentionally biases the project. So both government entities and companies do have their own biases at stake, which is not a bad thing. I think we just have to disclose that. But I hope to see more independent research and academic scholars or even just open source contributors to do so. I currently maintain a very quirky collection of open data sets that are based on reality TV and pop culture. So hit me up, and there are things that I've either found and contributed to or playing around with or exploring. So I hope more people do that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I guess I'm next. So I work at an academic library.
Dope,
at a
super
university.
cool.
And so we have our own Open Data Week that we have in October. And so what would be one piece of advice that you would give librarians who are interested in this topic?
Absolutely love this question as well. Also thank a librarian if you haven't, because they save our lives and make our lives better for so many amazing reasons. I'm like, give it up for librarians if you're still around, because so much, that's what we need to do. One of the things that I really appreciated about Open Data Week in New York is they actually really explored, I think so many times, and even myself, like I came from a liberal arts background, I was scared to use open data at first. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's super technical or it's super, hard and complex. Breaking it down and showing that it doesn't always need to be a technical skill. Actually, I think a lot of the things that we're missing in data science and machine learning is the context problem. So even if you're annotating a data set and putting it on a README, if you're creating an art piece on open data, there was a really cool exhibit recently, and it was a couple years back now, but it was in the Nevada Museum of Art, and they took temperatures and they put it on like a cool chart that was like blown with glass, but it was based on a publicly available data set about climate change in Nevada. And I was like, this is so cool, but it's also very pretty. So challenging for people who don't traditionally see themselves in data science to get involved in the way that I think is very interesting, and thinking it more of a storytelling problem, not so much as a machine learning techie problem. So be my advice. And I'm also happy to chat about it if you want it more, because academics, I got the nerd, comes with the glasses, I'm a nerd at heart. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Opening data probably not very new problem, and it was a lot of experience with that. And in many cases, opening data is kind of dangerous thing to do. So you can be sued, you could be ostracized with all that stuff. What are the patterns developed so far to break that stigma to close the data?
Yeah, to break the stigma of closing the data. Yeah, I think this is a really good problem. I think it goes down to consent. So every time that you're collecting a data point, whether it's an intentional, they filled out a form and said, I opt in, or if it's a passive data collection, meaning that you've been tracking them on their site, which there's a whole other ethical discussion we can get into there, is what is the consent that you've opted into the data, and what is the people whose data that is, what do they think of that? And again, going back to the impact problem, where might we have impact issues? So actually, I used to volunteer. There's a group that I volunteered with. It's a fact-checking group that would fact-check. It was an election incident response group. And so it was a group that basically works with journalists and newsrooms to track incidences of violence and hate speech and bigotry that happens during election periods. And we did have to close off some of our data. But the reason is because people were coming in who had bad intentions and were damaging the data set, so we couldn't follow it. But one of the things we did is we created like an onboarding process. So it wasn't like, no, you're never getting the data ever. It was like, hey, because unfortunately of bad actors, we need to restrict some of this data and make sure that it's safe for everybody and is actually doing the original intention that we need to get to, which is creating a better and a more informed electoral public and keeping people safe as they go to vote. So that's kind of what I would recommend, is thinking about it and the long-term impact of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hi.
So certainly first, thanks for your talk. It was awesome. slides, information, great.
Thank you.
Second thing, you talked about some of the data sets that you enjoy using, you like, the NYC open data. My two questions, sorry.
All good.
Question one being, are there data sets that you've come across that you saw and said, oh Lord, no one should ever use this data? And then the second question is, are there like teams or groups that are kind of doing the work of looking at open data sets and providing that level of analysis on the data sets that are out there? So those are the two questions.
Yeah,
One,
super
your
cool.
personal adventure, and then two, open groups that are also reviewing them.
Yeah. So first off, on your first question of a data set that I've been like, oh man, we shouldn't be looking at this one. One of the places that and it was actually shared among friends that I used to work with, a machine learning engineer I used to work with shared this one, and we were like, oh man. So password leaks are a thing that happen. Someone built a machine learning model with the original intention of testing passwords and security purposes, but it's openly accessible and available. But it's based off of password leaks. So that's a little scary to know that that's out there. But that's definitely one. It's publicly available and it's been used in academic research. So that's one of the ones that initially comes to mind there. And as far groups that are maintaining and kind of providing the context question, if you look into open science initiatives, we see a lot of this, and there's a big open science movement right now and public data movement, which is kind of getting more people into that and talk to those folks. Open data weeks are kind of a common thing that are starting to happen. So check out those places. Also Kaggle, if you're into the data science and machine learning world, they have a lot of really great resources to getting started. And a lot of people will upload their data sets there. Also, there's a lot of libraries if you just Google, like for an example, I wanted to build a Beyonce data set for just sillies.
Because Beyonce.
Yeah, because why not? It's Beyonce. Okay, come on, like great. And someone has done a data set of Beyonce best song lyrics, which is like a bajillion songs long because it's Beyonce. So kind of exploring with that. And if someone isn't maintaining it, this is a call to action, be the person to maintain it. So like, again, in my goofy example, I'm currently working with someone who I've never met in person across the internet, a fellow Twitch streamer, and we're building Naked and Afraid reality TV show data set and maintaining and doing weird things with it. So yeah, do it. Take advantage of it. Have some fun. Cool. And if anybody wants to help hack on some Naked and Afraid data and likes reality TV, hit me up because it's pretty fun.
Thanks so much, Erin.
And I think that's the thing. We're getting kicked out for time, but I'm happy to chat with you afterwards. Thank you.